Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has confirmed he is under investigation over whale specimen collection and is blaming it all on the weaponization of the government. Here's the former presidential candidate speaking during a Trump campaign event in Arizona. Let's watch.
This week, I received, right after I endorsed President Trump, I received a letter from the National Marine Fisheries Institute saying that they were investigating me for collecting a whale specimen 20 years ago. It's 15 years past the statute of limitation, but they're opening an investigation. And this is all about the weaponization of our government against political opponents of the party in power. And it's dangerous for our democracy, as my father understood. And every American, whether you're Democrat or Republican, should be offended by it.
Now, for context here, back in 2012, Kennedy's daughter told a magazine that her dad had cut the head off a whale that had washed up on the shore at Hyannisport, Massachusetts. That interview gained new traction again after RFK Jr. ended his campaign and endorsed former President Trump. An environmental advocacy group last month called for Kennedy to be investigated over the incident. That was the Center for Biological Diversity Action Fund, and they said in a letter to NOAA that it is, quote, illegal to possess any part of an animal, dead or alive, end quote, and that NOAA should open an investigation. Of course, this adds to the growing list of peculiar stories about RFK Jr., including reports that he ate a dog, had a brainworm, and of course, who can forget the bear carcass left in Central Park.
It's a lot of animal-related stories. I guess the guy loves animals.
Like a gothic Dr. Dolittle or something. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, so, okay, look, I don't know that this episode needs to be re-investigated or re-litigated by the marine authorities. This was a long time ago, and with the bear in Central Park was at least a significant mystery or a headache for the police. Sure. It was not something he should have done, and I see why they were still looking into it, because it was a mystery for how it got into Central Park. That he said he didn't kill the whale. He found, this is ridiculous things I'm saying, but found the whale, took the head. I guess I don't know that it's certainly not a serious enough crime to merit looking into. So I looked it up though, and the daughter, we didn't even get into all the details of how she described the head being bungee corded to the family's car. I'm reading from NBC now. And she said every time we accelerated on the highway, whale juice would pour into the windows of the car, and it was the rankest thing on the planet. We all had plastic bags over our heads with mouth holes cut out, and people on the highway were giving us the finger. But that was just normal day-to-day stuff for us.
What a mental image to have in all our minds. I mean, it is gross. I think the reason that environmental group wants it sort of put forward is that it really just underlines the whole RFK Jr. is a weirdo thing. That's what they're trying to create, right?
If you run afoul of the deep state, they will go digging up
dead whales.
All the dead whales in your closet, all the dead bears, let he among us cast the first stone who has not defiled the corpse of an animal.
One of the things that I am curious about and didn't have time to research is what the penalty might be for decapitating a dead whale and strapping it to the roof and going about your business. Because
the penalty is going to be he has to remain on the ballot in those states.
Maybe to dissuade people from voting, or to
help out Kamala. That's what the deep state animal lovers are doing here. No, look, this is, it's funny. I mean,
what else can we say? I mean, it's a long time ago, but it is a story that was passed over, I guess, at the time, because he wasn't a candidate when his daughter made those comments in an interview. I believe it was Town and Country magazine some years ago. Obviously, when he did become a candidate, there is opposition research done on anyone, particularly third-party candidates. There has been a pretty concerted Democratic push to marginalise RFK Jr. I would argue he's done plenty to marginalise himself, but this is one of the reasons, I think, why this story about the whale, many years old, is getting re-ventilated at this point.
Yes, so RFK Jr. has attempted to get out of the presidential race. He is remaining on the ballot in some states, but he's trying to get his name off swing states.
Right.
He's endorsed Donald Trump. He's concerned, and he's called on his supporters to vote for Donald Trump instead of him in the event that he is still on those ballots. Feel like the Democratic consensus on RFK Jr. has totally switched because they were fighting to keep him off the ballot in a variety of places. They had an entire, in-house political action type thing. Worried about RFK Jr. that he was going to eat into the Biden vote. That ended up being totally wrong, basically. But they fought very hard in New York, for instance, to keep him off the ballot there. Now he's trying to get off the ballot, and they want him to stay there because they think it splits off some tiny number of Trump voters.
Right.
And this is going to be a very close election, particularly in the swing states, in Pennsylvania in particular. So now he's hitting the campaign trail. Him and Tulsi Gabbard, two former Democrats, have endorsed Trump, out there talking about how the Democratic Party has changed and it's no longer welcoming to their sorts of views, and Donald Trump is who they support. And I think it's been good news for Trump that he's had them in his corner.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big skeptic of RFK Jr. during the whole process of this campaign. Firstly, because I don't really share the view that his supporters share of him, which is of this sort of bold truth teller. I frankly think of him as a bit of a crank who wouldn't have got anywhere near the attention he has gotten were it not for his last name. But it is it is going to be a close election. Nobody expects in the states that he's on the ballot him to accrue some massive number of votes. But the key point is those battleground states where the polling, at least for what it's worth, would indicate that it is going to be extremely tight. Maybe he will have some bearing one way or another.
Look, I certainly don't agree with all of his political stances, and I never have. He was a Democrat until very recently. He has a long history of advocacy on environmental and energy and labor issues that I disagree with as a libertarian. And I also don't agree with everything he thinks about personally the vaccines. However, I think his message has resonated with a lot of COVID-frustrated Americans who felt that the elite medical government establishment consensus in this country was not respecting their liberties and went astray in many different ways. And he was a victim of a massive, I would argue, censorship pressure campaign on the behalf of the federal government to get him purged from social media. I think sometimes he's been taken out of context and misconstrued by the mainstream media to have said things that are not nearly as inflammatory or wrong as they portrayed them as. But that said, he's a former Democrat, so his policies are, broadly speaking, not mine, but I'm glad that he has called attention to particularly to the censorship, to the efforts by the federal government to control what you are allowed to say about COVID. Because even if what you're saying is wrong, I don't think it should be purged from. So it's certainly not at the government's behest. If the social media companies want to set their own rules, ultimately it's their websites. But I was very perturbed by the amount of communications between the CDC and Facebook that had to do with him, a private citizen. I
mean, I don't really agree with you on the COVID question, but I know that's a big central part of his appeal, is the appeal to COVID skeptics or to vaccine skeptics. There is a conversation to be had about issues that the government overreached on there, but I think that he is far too prone to reckless claims or to claims that are unsupported by evidence. Does that mean he should be purged? Not really, but I don't consider him personally a particularly credible figure.
Well, that's a whale of a tale. We'll have more Rising right after this.